Welcome to the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up for the week of 17 May 2020, episode 36. Wow. It's the month that time continues to forget, although some things are starting to reopen. Show news, Danny Trejo, COVID-19 contact tracing, SaltStack, and lots of hacked supercomputers. Ooh, that's fun. And all this and more on the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Hi, I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, your host, and welcome to the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show. First, let's wrap up all the show topics for this week. On Application Security Weekly number 107, Mike, Matt, and John had an interview with Jack Zaras. Sorry, not Zach Jarris. Jack Zaras, the senior sales engineer at Signal Sciences. They were talking about rate limiting. Specifically, this was about object ID enumeration, and they had a demo of an attack in process so that you could better understand why rate limiting is actually an important thing. So that was kind of cool. A second interview was with Tim Mackey, who is the principal security strategist in the Synopsys Cybersecurity Research Center. Ooh, that's hard to say. Synopsys Cybersecurity Research Center. Actually, I did okay. The interview was discussing Synopsys OSSRA report, which showed that 91% of commercial applications contain outdated or abandoned open source components. Now, this was very timely discussion for me, as this week there was a lot of other news, and there's several news stories we'll report on in a minute about similar findings from Veracode and that I reported on Tuesday, and I'm going to reiterate those because about open source code and flaws in open source code. So a very interesting thing to catch up on there. On Business Security Weekly number 174, Paul, Jason, and Matt interviewed Mike Adler. He is the vice president. Sorry, I mistyped that. The vice president at RSA Net Witness Platform at RSA. The topic was about virtual SOCs and how our new normal mode of remote work makes this a fairly major impact. And I have seen that myself. We all have SOCs, and a lot of us are having to access our SOCs. I have two different SOCs that I can access, and both of them are now being run virtually. So the ability to do that is a pretty important topic right now, especially for people that actually can't get to things physically at this point. I mean, right now there's a lot of issues around, could you even get to it physically if you needed to? And so there's a fairly interesting problem that companies are facing right now with how they get to these resources, both virtually and literally, physically, analog, I don't know, IRL. On Enterprise Security Weekly number 184, John, Matt, and Paul had an interview with Dan DeCloss, the founder and CEO of PlexTrack. This conversation was around how to track and manage all the different types of assessments that are being done, whether it's red teaming, self-assessments, all kinds of stuff that you're collecting all the time. How do you manage all these things and keep them organized so that somebody can actually get through them? And a second interview was with DJ Sampath, the CEO of Armor Blocks. And the topic of that segment was how email security is still not a solved problem and how the remote world we are now residing in is an increased threat. They did talk about interesting attacks that they've been seeing in the last several weeks that were based in email, and also what happens when, and I really like this part of it, when attackers shift away from phishing into other types of attack like smishing, etc. And we're seeing more of that now because attackers are being stopped. We still haven't solved the email problem, but it's starting to slow down, I think. I don't have the date on that. On Security Weekly News number 35, Jason Wood joined me with expert commentary on a ransomware gang that got arrested in Romania for attacking healthcare assets in, well, Romania. Not good, guys. Come on. They were using Locky against healthcare assets in their home country, so they got arrested in their home country, and basically, it's bad to do this anyway, but it's particularly bad to do it in Romania. So, come on. Enough is enough with the healthcare stuff. Let's let that go, okay? I also showed off one of my DEF CON is canceled t-shirts, so if you want to see it, you should check that out. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 29, Jeff, Matt, and Josh and Scott had an interview with Ann Cleveland, the executive director of the University of California, Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. The topic was about why long-term was in the name, and introduced their recent joint study with Booz Allen called Considerations for Effective Oversight of Cyber Risk. As is often the case, the interview spilled over into the second segment on this show and provided a really nice discussion of this long-term cybersecurity idea that they are promoting. It was really not something I had heard of, so it's definitely an interesting report that I think you should probably check out and a new idea. On Paul's Security Weekly episode 652 tonight, yes, I said tonight, since I recorded this ahead, and we actually were sending it out live as well since we've been doing live casts all week. On rare occasion, the slave driving management of Security Weekly grant the lowly peons who do all the work, and I'm not including myself in that. They grant I don't ever do any work, but they grant all the lowly peons a day off, and so we can't record on Friday. So we recorded today to allow all those vacation days on Friday, which means that we can only extrapolate all the fun that you'll have watching the show tonight. Although if you're watching this on Friday, then I guess you're not really extrapolating all it's getting complicated now. It's going to be an episode of Doctor Who. First up on Paul's Security Weekly, an interview with Jason Nicola, the COO and Senior Security Consultant at Pulsar Security. This segment shall be about building an actual InfoSec career. They talked about the care and feeding of your career and also talked about B-Sides New Hampshire conference. If you're not familiar with B-Sides, you should check those out. They have them all over the place, and they're great conferences to get involved in if you're interested in such things. They have that feel of old DEF CONs, like from back in, like 2001 or something like that, the really old time DEF CONs, and so they're pretty fun. The tech segment on Paul's Security Weekly is with Sven Morgenroth, a security researcher at NetSparker, and the topic is about security headers in HTTP and how to harden them properly. So again, to me, that's a really interesting topic. We all use HTTP headers, so I don't think very many people ever take time to stop and go, how do those things actually work? I don't know what I'm going to drink tonight for the show. When I was writing all this, I was back to drinking cognac again. I had a bottle of Paulbo Ordage cognac that I got in France that is really good, and I was doing that. Unfortunately I can't do day drinking here on the show because I have to shoot a red teaming panel video before the show tonight and do some other serious work during the day, which probably isn't a good idea if I show up, So I probably won't have a lot of time to make anything fancy. Probably make another one of those Vesper Martinis, though, because those are really, really good. I really like those a lot. My favorite thread of the week is going to have to be, your apps. This week, I saw multiple studies showing a large number of commercial apps use open source APIs. Okay, we all know that. And other add-ons that people have started including, and you just every day you see something is being made available on GitHub, that some tool, some library, whatever, and a large number of these referential things are filled with security flaws because maybe I wrote one of them. From the problem of keeping up with which open source content. So I would say that proprietary content is included in this as well. If you included that in your app, to the problem of versioning all these things, as well as, not to mention, patch problems. And patch problems go in two directions. So there's both a patch problem from you and there's a patch problem to you. All those are going to definitely get involved with this third-party content, and likely the content, according to some of these studies we reported on, are going to have flaws. So this is one of the real issues that I see with the original object-oriented concept of reusable code. I mean, back when I first started reading about object-oriented programming a long time ago, probably before some of you were born, we were being promised that everything would be better by now in terms of there being tons of code already developed, including people that were saying things like eventually all the code you could ever need will already have been written, which is kind of like saying all the music that could ever be written is already written, but I don't agree with that either. But it meant, and we see that today, that you could quickly prototype things into new code instead of having to start from scratch. So if you want to write a bot, for instance, there's the most recent little project that I was doing. I went on GitHub. There's all kinds of libraries and tools and things that you can use to write a bot, and you don't have to actually start from scratch every single time. Whether it's video game engines, if you see all this sort of convergence in video games where they all start to kind of look similar because people are all using those same back-end engines, to malware frameworks, we're seeing all that stuff shift into this same model. It's all out there. So the problem is, even if it's open source, it still turns into a black box if the problem set gets big enough. So if that problem space grows big enough, you can't really fathom it. And of course, this forward and backward patching problem that I was talking about, if the tool patches automatically, and this can result in crashes and other problems. So like there was a Facebook thing a couple of weeks ago where they changed some code and it caused all this login stuff to crash. Or a lack of patching being done by you or even by the people that made the code, all those problems are going to sit there undetected until you get got. So it's definitely time to start being more diligent and get the security teams involved from square one and start figuring out how we should best manage all of these add-ons that are going to continue to grow in use going forward. You're going to see more and more of this. And now so now all the top news from the shows. I'll shut up about that. Supercomputers, and whenever I see the word supercomputers, I used to get to work with a supercomputer, a Cray supercomputer, and it was really cool. But supercomputers across Europe were hacked with what appears to be basically the goal of using them to mine cryptocurrency. Archer in Edinburgh, I misspelled it. Hawk in Stuttgart, BW unit cluster, and four here 2 clusters in Karlsruhe, Justice in Ulm, Binac at Tübingen, and all of those reported security. I love the names of supercomputers. All those reported security incidents following the LRZ in Bavaria, which was shut down after a security breach. Jülich, Germany had to shut down the Eureka, UDAC, and UELS, as well as the Taurus supercomputer in Dresden. The only ones missing are Wintermute and Neuromancer. We don't see those on there. Apparently, all these cases involved a compromise via SSH logins. So here we go. SSH logins based on malware samples that were reviewed by Cato Security in the UK. The attacks all started from, wait for it, credential stuffing attacks with stolen credentials at universities in Canada, China, and Poland. Okay, so after they logged in with these stolen credentials, CVE 2019-15666 was used to get root and deploy Monero miners. So if you didn't memorize all the CVEs, this is basically an out-of-bounds array access for really old Linux kernels that were before like 5.0.19. So If you have a supercomputer, which often use old Linux kernels, you may well be subject to some of these threats. So, keep that in mind. It was an interesting attack to read up on. COVID-19 threat intelligence from Microsoft's database is being made open source to allow others to use the information about techniques, tactics, procedures, etc., all available via Azure Sentinel or even on public GitHub. So they're actually releasing all that information that they have collected about COVID-19 attacks, and I'm going to share it with everybody so that I guess anyone could use that information to develop various and sundry things. In light of that, COVID contact tracing text message scams seem to be developing rapidly. Makes sense. Basically, if you don't know what contact tracing is, you probably will pretty soon. But we've all been, drawn into some of these committees. Contact tracing is a rapidly emerging industry now of trying to keep up with human movement and infection in the time of plague. It's a big job to try to track all your employees, and there's all kinds of issues around this about privacy and so forth. But just the simple logistics of trying to track possibly thousands of people on campuses, in buildings, et cetera, et cetera. There are both human and application elements to this whole process. This particular problem is a text message that tells you that you've been exposed to COVID-19. This is a smishing attack, of course, and asks you to click a link for info about what to do next. Basically, it says, this is contact tracing and so forth. This link, of course, downloads software that gives the smisher access to your personal and financial information stored on your phone. A lot of people, even if they're more, competent at dealing with phishing attacks on PCs and their computers, are still very, very not so astute on their mobile devices. So when they get those text messages, they just click things and so forth. So definitely take that up with your people. At the same time, Apple and Google are building out one of these contact tracing apps, but experts are now saying that it may prove to be worthless since the data privacy focus that Google and Apple took with this has really limited the ability of the app to actually create useful data. The joint venture has stated they will not transfer information about the user and they will not use GPS tracking on the device. So basically, it turns into a little app where you can self-report that does track who you've come into contact with through the phone's communication devices. But supposedly, because of the amount of privacy they put in place on that, I don't think they wanted to be the straw man in this to see what happens. So they basically said, I think we're going to go overkill on it. The software was launched on Wednesday, so yesterday, and is available in the App Store and Google Play Store. So if you want to play with it, you can certainly download it. If there is any good news, though, from COVID-19, there was an article this week that COVID-19 is possibly accelerating the transformation in enterprise security in our organization. So the rapidly accelerating drive towards a digital first economy has been dramatically increased by the pandemic. Obviously. But this article highlights some of the change that's going on and that is driving the rapid change in securing the enterprise from digital threats. So definitely interesting thing. And then about those insecure apps that I was talking about earlier, in an Oracle KPMG cloud threat report for 2020, 750 cybersecurity and IT professionals were surveyed, and one of the main findings were that 78% of organizations used more than 50 cybersecurity products to address security issues. Wow, that is a lot of tools that are being used. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that that's a lot of different tools that are being used. This is a good report to read up on what is going on, but it really worries me that so many products are being put in place, given these same reports that we saw earlier, that open source security flaws were found in 70% of these APIs and open source code libraries that were available. Okay, so that makes me a little bit concerned, because if everybody's using all this stuff, you're using a lot of different things. The likelihood then that you're going to have something in some of these 50 different tools starts to make me kind of nervous about the whole thing. For instance, SaltStack, the Salt product, which is a Python tool, had a serious problem And we have discussed this previously, but this new report showed that 20 breaches in the first 3 days of this month were revolved around this Salt Python open source project. This particular one called Salt, which provides tools for event-driven IT automation and configuration management. So all those things add up to me being a little bit worried because you're seeing examples of it. We're seeing reports showing that large numbers of these open source APIs and libraries have issues, and we're seeing reports showing that companies use a large number of tools just for their cybersecurity. So all that to me adds up. And finally, Doug feels old. I did. This made me feel old because I was reading this story and I was like, what is this? I had seen this referred to a couple times before, but it makes you feel old when you start seeing, people and you start feeling like, these kids today and they're Fortnite and yeah. Apparently, but I was going to decide I would report on it for you. Hackers began putting star fragments into Animal Crossing New Horizons. Okay, so I immediately sort of tune into this because I see hackers were doing something. I didn't know what star fragments were. I didn't know what Animal Crossing New Horizons was. So that, of course, made me feel really old. But this is an online video game, if you haven't seen it. It's very popular. I know some of you are going, oh, my God, I can't believe he's saying that. If you haven't seen it. But it is, and I had never heard of it. So the star fragments are items that you obtain from actions within the game by wishing on shooting stars during meteor showers. Okay. So, typical video game kind of stuff, right? It's sort of like you do an action during, and I used to teach game programming. So it's not that I have any problem with video games. I just don't keep up with them all the time. And there's lots of them now. But apparently you do this and then it creates these resources in the game that you can do something with. So if you wish on a shooting star, you get a resource and you can use it to build something else. So very, Minecraft-y kind of, at least that was, I did not go play the game. But the hackers found a way to put these trees that have star fragments into the game, which apparently affects the way that you use them and the resources don't work the way they were intended. So, stuff hackers are always doing. But I did go on and read that Danny Trejo, who's one of my favorite actors, I really like the guy. I think he's a lot of fun, and he's such a nice guy in real life, and he always plays these like super scary, dangerous guys in films and things. That he had announced he was playing Animal Crossing, and when his arrival in the game popped up, it generated a whole lot of interest on Twitter, like hundreds of thousands of tweets and things about that Danny Trejo had arrived, and then he has an island in Animal Crossing. So I guess you'll just either have to go there and check out Danny Trejo's island or check out the star fragments hanging in trees, or I may just go out and chase the kids off my virtual lawn with a virtual shotgun. We won't really do anything like that in the real world, but, hey, in video games, anything's possible. And that's a news wrap-up for the week of 17 May 2020 in the time of plague, in the before time. As things start to reopen, use common sense, please. I'm Doug White from the RD Online Cybersecurity program at Roger Williams University. See you next week on the network that never shuts down, Security Weekly. Read the science and stay safe.